All right, didn't want to forget that part this time.
And then we're live, like people will show up as they come in, or if they come in.
Yes.
Well, we know we always have our 2 or 3, so let's see if they show tonight.
Deborah, have you attended before?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I'm doing it from my phone, so it takes me a minute to figure it out. But yes, I've done the last 2 weeks. This is my third.
Okay, and are you're able to see the screen on your phone, or are you just listening?
Nope, I can see it.
Okay, great.
I thought that was our Deborah. I thought
I
that
did too at first. And then I saw the last name. It's like, oh, that's not our Deborah.
I'm with CSFS, Community Family Services Foundation in Region 6. I'm a foster with them.
Right.
And Region 6 is really big. Are you south or in Vancouver? Are you in Olympia? Or are you out on the coast? Vancouver. Well, welcome. In the case that it's only you today, why don't I would still like to get your opinions on some of this. Maybe we don't do a full out 1 hour, hour and a half, but I think it'd be worth it since you've been here repeated weeks. I mean, your input's been valuable.
Yeah, that's great. Whatever, just power right through it.
All right, we'll give it 1 more minute. If not, we'll just do a real intimate setting tonight and get to it. So Debbie, I'm not sure, or sorry, Deborah, I'm not sure if it is an interest to you, but we are still looking for reps. I don't know what your time commitment looks like. Has that been something that's been on your mind that you've been thinking about, or do you think you'll continue to participate after these listening and learning sessions?
Yeah, actually, I had emailed after last week wanting to get some more information about the October meeting. I'm going to be out of town for 2 weeks, so I didn't want to commit to something that I couldn't be at. But I never got the information. There was a couple of us that asked to get kind of an idea of what the schedule for October was. But like I said, I'll be gone for 2 weeks in October, and I don't want to, bail on you. You think I'm going to be there, but I know I couldn't.
Yeah, I don't think 2 weeks is an issue. I mean, it's multiple weeks of negotiating. So Marge went out of town last week on annual leave, and she came back. She's sick, and she's that person who was going to make contact with you. So I'll make sure to pass along your information. Deborah, I'm pretty sure we have it, but just in case, why don't you throw it in the chat? Why don't you throw your email and maybe a phone number? Maybe Marge just calls you directly if you have the time.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, but other than that, let's get into the wax. We won't go through the PowerPoint. Sorry, Anna, for making you put that up. Let's go ahead and just go straight to the wax.
You know how hard I worked putting that up there?
Thank you, Anna. So we'll go line by line and read on our own. But first, Deborah, I kind of wanted to ask, there's this conversation around privacy, right? And what that looks like for a child in your home. What do you do around cell phones and computer use and electronics when it comes to privacy or phone calls, right? What does that look like in your home?
Honestly, I haven't had a child old enough to have those kinds of things.
Okay.
But I do have a previous foster who's no longer in care. I still get her every other weekend. I have a good relationship with the family, etc. And I don't let her have that shit. I hate it. I hate electronics. Yeah. And she's not a foster, so I'm allowed to hate it.
Right.
I don't have to listen to somebody's state rule that says that kid on there all day. She's just addicted to it, and it just, I have huge issues with the privacy, and that's a big part of why I really wanted to hear tonight,
Yeah.
because of sexual predators. You know, I was married to a cop for 25 years. My sister's a 911 dispatcher. I am super vigilant about that kind of stuff. And in the case of my previous foster, Brooklyn, I had alerted her grandma and her dad to somebody she was chatting with on Roblox or something. It's a kid game.
Hmm.
And supposedly it's supposed to have all these safety features. Well, this person turned out to be a teenage boy, and Brooklyn's 7.
Okay.
So I have huge issues with it. So I'd like to learn, if I had an older kid, what is my expectation to allow them to have it?
Yeah. Let's welcome in Roxana first before we keep going into conversation. Hi, Roxana. Can you hear us? All right. No response from Roxana, but okay, perfect. You can hear us. We're talking about we're looking at the WAC 1540, Roxana, and we're talking about what privacy must I provide for children in my care. And we started off the conversation rather than going line by line, but really talking about what privacy looks like around cell phones, computer use, and other electronics. I don't know if you do want to just feel free to jump in to add to the conversation. But going back to that, Deborah, yeah, I mean, I think this is what we want to learn here is you yourself have the rights, you know, it's your home. You have prudent parenting to make certain decisions, right? And then we have these we have the DS settlement, right? Where there's 7 areas of improvement, and one of them is cell phone use and social activities. Youth were voicing in this lawsuit that they wanted the right to use their cell phones when developmentally appropriate, right? But also engage in just normal childhood activities. So with that idea, and then kind of what you're saying is, I don't like that. Where do you feel like is the middle ground? Do you feel like you have the right to reject use of these type of things, or is there a middle ground?
I feel like, you know, and I've talked about this in a couple other trainings, is, you know, a big part of it is when the kid or young adult comes to your house, is ask them what their expectations are of me. You know, what would make this the most successful placement for you? Tell me what that looks like to you, because everybody's so caught up in what works for them. What's working for these kids? And if it's reasonable, why not find that middle ground? You know, how I raise my kids isn't the same as how these kids are raised, so it's hard to put those, you know, comparisons there. I think that there could be a middle ground, that you have a conversation, that maybe that's part of something that you have with the caseworker and the child before placing, and just say, what's your expectations? These are my expectations, and let's find something. You know, nothing after 8 o'clock, definitely nothing through the middle of the night, things like that. Kids stay on the phone way too late. Parents are asleep, they don't know what they're doing, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say no phone after 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Or, you know what I mean? Why
Yeah.
can't they come to some kind of a contract, you know, that gives them some responsibility in choosing those times, and then you can also hold them accountable to what they agreed to. And you know, then as that continues to grow, then maybe they'll have more time because they're showing responsibility. But the whole, this is mine, that's mine, you don't have a right to that. Well, the state asks us to love these kids and raise them as our own, but there's the capital BUT. Well, that's not the same. You either want me to raise them the way the state regulates it, or you want me to raise them and love them and keep them safe like I would my own children. So
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask you a loaded question here. And it goes around, the right to privacy. Say, okay, this youth is gonna have a cell phone, a 14-year-old's gonna have a cell phone. And you say, okay, back to that right of privacy. I mean, there's a big difference between I'm having phone calls and I'm texting my friends versus, okay, I'm on social media, I'm on Snapchat, I'm on Instagram. Um, how do you feel around, I mean, you shared that incident with Crossroads. Um, what are your thoughts around social media? I mean, now are we talking, is that a right to privacy, or tell me more, what's your opinion on social media and cell phone use?
I guess I feel like with my kids, well, my nieces and whatnot, they're not old enough. Don't they have to be over 18 to even have Snapchat and Facebook and all of that? So they really technically shouldn't be on any of it if they're not of age.
Mhm.
So I would just want to, well, I'm 99% positive Facebook you have to be 18. I don't know about Snapchat and all the other ones. But right there, that cuts it. You don't have that on your phone. If you put it on your phone, then we're going to take the phone away. That's your choice. You're breaking a rule. The rule is you have to be 18 to have those social media accessibility. So I guess for me, that's a pretty dark line for me. I've just seen way too much negativity. Girls, boys, the bullying. My sister's away from me right now, but she don't want to hear it. I hate that her girls have them. It's nothing but drama and stress with the bullying with school-age girls and boys for that matter. But I just think it's just one more avenue to create a situation. I don't know. For me, I would just say come to an agreement, write up an agreement, and call it a contract or whatever, and hold them accountable. And they would hold me accountable as well if I'm breaking something on that. But if the rules say you have to be 18 to have Snapchat and Twitter and Instagram, then you're not having it. Not here, because when you think about the total responsibility of my role, and that child meets somebody at Safeway 2 blocks from my house to get a coffee, and they disappear, they're looking at me. Why? Well, what do you mean you let her be on Snapchat? She has to be 18. You know what I mean? The trickle effect is way too wide.
Gotcha.
Are you guys all panicking?
No, I mean, there's no panicking. I mean, these sessions are, to learn more about what your pain points are, what, the purpose is to talk about this because it's not in our WAC, right? And there's no rules or policy throughout DCYF. So this is the type of information we want to hear.
Yeah, well, I think,
Felix?
just on that age thing, the legal age right there, that would give us direction for sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Eva.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to share, Roxana's audio isn't working. I encouraged her, she's listening in. I encouraged her to share any discussions, comments she has in the chat. And we also had Jeremy join us.
Okay,
So
welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if I had the wrong Zoom one, but I went back one to a different meeting and used that, so it worked. So
Yeah, hey, no problem. I'm not sure how much of the conversation you heard. We're talking about WAC 1540. We're talking about what privacy must I provide for children in my care. And before we start looking at line by line, we just started the conversation around what privacy looks like around cell phones, computer use, or other electronics. I don't know if what age range you have in your home. But how do you approach privacy and cell phone use, or iPads or other electronics?
yeah, so we've had a lot of little kids, but we did do a small time with a 14-year-old. She turned 14 in our care, which is that age where 14 matters. So this is why I was interested in this, because I mean, I don't have the answers, but it's definitely a tricky space because we had she brought with a cell phone somebody else was paying for, a family member, I believe. And so we had no way of monitoring it, or it became a really big pain point, because kind of the other person mentioned it. We heard conversations that we were worried about on it, but there was no way for us to, obviously it was a delicate situation. It was a connection to her family. There's some really positives that can come out of it, but it can put families in tough situations, in the sense that, it's in our home, but it's like a connection we can't control coming in and out. Like if we were to have a kid and then we were provided the phone, then we could then say, well, we have these apps or that's monitored, and we have that conversation. But so those can be, I guess, tricky. And it was really, they transitioned back to the family, which was awesome.
Yeah.
We didn't know how much longer, because we didn't know the liability of it. If somebody like showed up at our house, we didn't know, like just
Right.
that we were nervous, not for us as much as for them in the situation that to put them in, and they're vulnerable. So
Yeah, I think that the intent behind this rule is that, children must have, children in placement specifically, must have reasonable access to uncensored communication with their parents or relatives or other important people to the children. But at the same time, like you're saying, this is your home. Your focus is to keep them safe, right?
Right.
Look after their well-being. So when we talk about cell phone use, what are some things that you would like to see? We don't have a policy, we don't have a whack around cell
Right.
phone use. It's more around communication or what needs to be private. What would you like to see when it comes to cell phones with youth? I know you just shared a little bit, but is there more specific things that we should be considering?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I don't know, with the laws, and when you get too granular, then you get too siloed, and that can get tricky, right? Because if
Yeah,
you
and I wouldn't necessarily worry about being right or wrong.
Right.
If we want to collect as much information and
Yeah,
let us
yeah.
figure out
What's
the
the
law
legal
side of things,
side?
and
I'm
yeah,
I work in HR, so I'm always thinking
gotcha.
liability and legal. And I'd say the struggle is it really it creates a pain point, because you're trying to support them. Most, not all kids, but they're pushing against it because it's a freedom. You're trying to say, we're trying to do this to protect you. A lot of times in our case, I'll say my case, they're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And we're like, well, we're trying to make it the best for you as possible. And these are things that we, see that can be troublesome, like you were using it in the night, and we were like trying to have them, but because we couldn't shut off the internet or have restrictions on it, it was just wide open, right? So that created pain points for us to then not have a balance, right? Because we were saying, we weren't going, you can't use it at all. We were just trying to find ways that they could age appropriate use it, I guess,
Mhm.
and have those conversations around it. And we were trying to work with the parents, but the parents also wasn't provided by them. So it was, we were all
Okay.
kind of in a tough spot. So that was kind of unique, right?
Mhm.
And the relative that was providing wasn't cooperative. So it's basically kind of a, I'd say, a unique situation in that sense. But we didn't really have any like a law to stand on saying, well, yes, it is your phone per se, but when it's in our home, there are some restrictions that we can maybe apply or something. Or I don't know how that would work legally, but just being able to have some powerful, because we would reach out to social workers and they're kind of like, hands are tied too. You know what I mean? Like, unless the person providing it decided to change their mind or cut it off, then we all kind of just were like crossing our fingers, which then puts families in tough spots because you're trying to help them best way you can, I guess. So
Yeah, Jeremy, do you believe that you have the right to say no cell phones in my home, or do you feel like there's a middle ground?
I think there's a middle ground.
Okay.
So I think one thing that maybe this is just my wife and I think we agree, communication with family so crucial, whoever that is, and having that connection point is so important. So if you say we get to pull that away from you and monitor it and whatever, I don't know. I don't think it builds bridges, and it doesn't help personally. I mean, all different boundaries are different, but I think if there's ways to structure it where it's structured communication, like you call these nights or
Okay.
like those types of things, if that can be built into the plan.
Yeah.
And the plan comes up, so it's up front. So the child is receiving that. If the placement, this is the plan, this is what's going to, and then everybody can kind of follow that, right? So you're not creating that guideline so much after the fact, so it feels like you're creating all these rules, I guess would be like, you can't do this, you can't do this, because it should be a partnership. We want you to be able to communicate with your parents, but you can't do that at 1 a.m. in the morning, right? You know,
Right.
so that type of thing. Sorry, I don't want to monopolize any time.
Oh, no, we got plenty of time. Deborah, Roxanne, anything to add to that, or any other thoughts coming about as you're hearing Jeremy speak?
Felix, I had a question just to follow up. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering about the prudent parenting. I don't know a lot about that, but where Jeremy's saying that, he didn't feel like he could place any boundaries on the phone. Does prudent parenting come into that scenario, Felix?
Yeah, it's a there's some pieces that I don't understand about prudent parenting. Like prudent parenting, the way that I've seen it, it applies more like, oh, the youth can go to overnight sleepovers, or they can go on a trip that's less than 72 hours within the state. But then like you get into these realms where I don't know if it's prudent parenting or not. I think we need to do more consultation with child welfare. But again, this is your home, right? So there are decisions that I would feel like you're entitled to, right, within your home. But then you have these rights that youth have. So it's finding the middle ground. But we'll definitely look more into prudent parenting and how it can guide through cell phones. All right, why don't we take about a minute or two and read through this WAC. We'll read it to ourselves and feel free to point out anything that you feel like is unclear, or you're really not sure why it belongs in this WAC, or if there's things that we could wordsmith for you. And then Eva, when you get the chance, do you mind making the print a little bigger, please? Perfect.
Felix, are you monitoring the chat too, or do you want me to? I just saw that Roxana did mention that she only has young children, so she doesn't have any input on the cell phones.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to keep an eye on it. So as we look at this 1540 WAC, we have a blanket statement for number one, that you must ensure the right to privacy of personal mail, electronic mail, and phone calls. And then we get into details of why we would allow electronic monitoring in a home. And it's really tied to that youth, either our infants, right? So you can use that the what are they called? The baby monitors. Either or that we get court approval for medical fragile youth or sick children. And of course there would be a process to that. Do we have any questions about this WAC? There's more to it, but I think that's the gist of the highlights of this WAC that I want to point out. Is there questions? Is anything not clear here?
This is Deborah. I kind of have a question about the the use of door or window alarms or motion detectors. I have an alarm system on my house, and I could see it if you had a child that was a runner or a runaway, that kind of a thing, but I use it just for my own personal safety.
Hmm.
So if I was going to be asked not to have my alarm on, I don't agree with that.
Okay. Eva could okay, yeah, I see Eva taking those notes. Deborah, is there any other pieces that you disagree with or are unclear?
I'm not sure what the LD stands for.
The LD stands for licensing division. So somewhere very, very far back, it gets written out as licensing division, and then it gets referred to as LD.
Yeah, I don't know how specific now that everybody has Ring doorbells and we have motion outside stuff, like if that is more could be encasing of like outside versus inside or even outside kids is not allowed, but is that more of a situational, since there should be less in the sense of privacy if you're doing things outside like playing and stuff, it's you know versus like monitoring in their rooms or in the house where their privacy might be more of a risk. I guess I might, now that I think that's more affordable and a lot of people have just that as their normal, like what does that, because it can be super helpful for kids to be able to hit the button and be able to communicate with somebody from their phone, their parent let them in or they can
Mhm.
come in, there's a lot of benefits that can also be provided in those areas as long as people are using them appropriate.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anything else in here, Jeremy, that is unclear to you? Or Roxanne, feel free to throw something in the chat. We'll make sure to monitor.
No, it's kind of straightforward. I guess it's like with cell phones, and when you dive into that side of things, it gets so much trickier because the layers, it's like an onion,
Mhm.
like, how, but, I agree with the personal mail, electronic. I think phone calls, should be importantly, and then obviously younger kids, it's a lot of times you use your device so that you can hear them cry. So I think all that's positive. I don't see anything. And the language allows for people to get exceptions, right?
Right.
Like, so if it's a reasonable exception, most likely it'll be approved. I mean, obviously, but so all that language, I guess the bottom one is more like now that tech has moved forward, there's more of that type of thing. Like, is it just for outside for different reasons, not to monitoring, not in the sense of monitoring the kid unless they are like a kid that does risk run. So maybe that is an important part of the plan. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy. Any other thoughts on 1540, whether it be cell phone use or privacy or the approval process to get electronic monitoring devices installed in your home? All right, we can always come back to this, but let's go ahead and move on to 1545. And here what we were talking about is inventory. So we're trying to address two things with this WAC. Is one, how do we ensure that a youth is leaving with all their personal belongings? But two, if they aren't able to leave with all their personal belongings, whether because their placement was disrupted or they just can't take everything with them at one time, how are we ensuring that they receive their belongings down the road? So let's just go ahead and start with open discussion before taking a look at the language. Deborah, Roxana, Jeremy, how are you all keeping track of inventory, or is it one of those things where I'm not keeping track of inventory?
I have not had any kids come with a ton of stuff, but when they do come, I usually just lay it out on my dining room table and take a picture. That way we all see the same thing and mom or whoever can't say, oh, I sent a blue sweatshirt. No, here's a photo of everything that they came with and I took it the day of, etc. And that's what I go by. And then of course, things we purchase through birthdays and holidays and whatever, just basic needs always goes with them.
Deborah, are you inventorying the things like you mentioned, the birthdays and all those other things? Are you keeping an ongoing inventory, I guess, or are you just using that?
No,
Okay,
no.
thank you.
I'm trying to sign on my computer. So if you see me on there twice, that's why.
All right, in the chat also, we have Roxana. I keep everything in one room and ensure it's all packed up when they move. So thank you for that, Roxana.
Think the photo idea is really cool. I'm gonna have to steal that. Just with tech, like allowing the timestamp, and you know, it's never gonna be perfect because they could say, well, you didn't take a picture of that item, right? So it's kind of a trick. I don't know if the social workers that a lot of times hand off do they like also document what comes through? I don't think I've ever seen that, but because we've had that situation where the child transitioned back and they were asking about a specific stuffed animal that never came to us. We don't know if it got lost in transit, you know, because they went, I think, to other places before us, not like homes, but to an office and to somewhere else. So, you know, things could get lost, or they just thought they sent it and it didn't go, lots of things. So we will go through an agency, so we have a list that we have to fill out.
Okay.
But then we don't keep track as we go, and so that's kind of it. Kind of, I guess, we just kind of know what we have and then what they get as we come along. And we've even given stuff that we have. Say a kid gets really attached to a stuffed animal that was here, we would send it along, like, because they like that stuff. And you know, we're not going to be like, that was ours. You know, certain things we do keep that. So it's kind of interesting because we also had kids long enough where they kind of aged out of certain things. Like we got them and we kept all the clothes that they came with, so we returned them, but they were no longer wearing the clothes. Obviously, we wouldn't get rid of them, but those are kind of interesting situations in that sense. But you know, people keep kids clothes, so it's important to do that. But yeah, it's keeping track along the way. I don't know, it can get a little sticky, I guess, if you're like, well, when did they get this from? Who this gets us from? But we always send everything as much as we can, but sometimes it's so much stuff. It's not possible to send 6 boxes of stuff yet.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. And I mean, this WAC is pretty short, I think. I mean, does anyone object to any of these, you know, rules of, you know, when a child leaves your home, they must take their personal belongings with them. This includes belongings the child brought with them and acquired in your care, such as clothing, mementos, bicycles, gifts, and any saved money. So I think the idea is, you know, if you're giving something to the child, that you're not taking it back, right? And that anything that they've earned or bought during that time, that they're also taking that with them. Are there any concerns with this first line?
No, it's good. Sounds good.
And line 2 kind of just addresses, if not possible for the child to take their belongings at the time they leave, you are required to secure them. You're required to secure them for up to 30 days and cooperate with the child's DCYF caseworker to transfer them to the child as soon as possible. What do we think about this line 2? I mean, is that your responsibility to take them to the child, or do we feel like that's the department's end?
I mean, I think it can be tricky, I guess, depending on the situation, because I've heard of some families when their children transition back to wanting contact with the foster family. So I guess the DCYF caseworker is that middle go-between for that situation. But sometimes it's fine and you can just, you're still have in that relationship, so you can drop things off or whatever. But I think it may be good to have that still in there to transfer them to the child, just because if they're like, we don't want them to know where we live, or we don't want them to have our address to send it to them, type of thing. I think that's kind of important. So
Thank you, Jeremy. Any other ideas around this WAC or any thoughts? Again, today we only have two WACs instead of three, so we are expected to go through a little quicker. But here we are, all done with these two WACs for tonight. Is there anything else we want to go back to the previous WAC and discuss, or any other thoughts that anyone wanted to bring up? Eva, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I did have, I know in the group care negotiations, I don't know if this has been a problem with any of you, but a group care provider had asked, what are we supposed to do with things beyond the 30 days? What if the children's things haven't been picked up within 30 days? What happens then? So just wondering if that has happened to anybody here, or what you would expect would happen, because this WAC doesn't say anything about that. Okay, I don't think that it's a problem for these folks, so.
I mean, we just never had an issue, so I can't speak myself. So, but yeah, it's also not clear. Does the CYF have to take this stuff? And then I don't know, for them, that seems like a storage nightmare, right? If they're, having to store all that, I don't know, the back end on that could be tough too, right? So.
Yeah, I think that could be a pretty fluid thing, depending on the relationship you have with the child or the family. If they're transitioning, or I don't know. I've never had the situation either. I've always had a pretty good relationship with the families, and never had a problem with getting the stuff back. But at the same time, these poor kids, because their parents fall through once again and don't get their stuff back, how fair is that to them? I think that maybe it just would be a conversation with the caseworker about, you could meet at DCYF and drop the stuff off and they pick it up, whatever. To me, it doesn't seem like a difficult thing to do. And once again, the kids are in the middle of it, and maybe there was something really special in those boxes. So I'm kind of sensitive to them not getting their stuff back.
Thank you, Deborah. All right, well, as Eva types up those notes, well, that really concludes our WAC discussion for today. If you do have any questions, or you want to stick back to give us more of your thoughts, feel free to stick on, but you're all free to log off if you'd like. Thanks for being here tonight.
Oh, do you want to give another plug, Felix, for the reps, needing reps for our negotiations? I know you mentioned it to Deborah, but I don't think Roxana or Jeremy were
Okay,
on.
yeah, not a problem. Roxana, Jeremy, I don't know how many sessions you've all attended, if you've attended Tuesdays or Thursdays, but thank you for being here tonight. We are still looking for reps. If I don't know if this interests either of you, but this means kind of organizing the caregivers within your regions. I think the NRM team will assist, I think, at first. But I think that your main responsibilities are for you to communicate with those reps in your region. You as reps, you are communicating with caregivers in your region, and you'll be at the negotiation table, or a series of reps will alternate being at the negotiation table, representing caregivers in your regions. At the table will also be other regional caregiver reps, but as well as a team of representatives from licensing division, from the CPAs, and from other stakeholders, I believe, will also give their input on wax, and that will be presented at the negotiation table. So Jeremy, Roxanne, I don't know if this is of interest to you, or if you still want to continue to participate after these listening and learning sessions. But if you'd like to stay on, we can give you more information on what that looks like.
Thanks. Yeah. I think I've seen stuff about that. I would have to look at it a little bit more.
Okay.
But I appreciate that. Maybe, do you have some information you email me, since I sent our email? Is that possible?
Yes, I see your
Yes.
information here in the chat. Marge is really our program manager for the foster care, and she has that information ready to go for you. So I'll pass along. She's out sick right now, but here in the next coming days, or maybe next week, expect that information.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time in doing this.
Thank you, Roxanne.